What's going on, guys? The Ancient Greek here, and now we are going to be talking about Classical Athens. Athens is my favorite Greek state and my favorite state in all of antiquity, to be honest. And I'm so excited to finally be getting to this video and talking about Athens in the classical era. Now, I apologize for the long period of time it took me to release this since the last video I did on Archaic Athens. And that is because I just had a lot of things I had to deal with. I had to make sure I was on the graduation list to get my degree and deal with a bunch of other stuff. So yeah, I'm glad to be finally getting back to you, my Phil Hellenes, and let's jump right into this. So, Classical Athens. It really, to start with, like, early Athenian military history and the whole deal with the Persian Empire that Athens ended up getting itself into. So, at this time, Sparta, as opposed to Athens, considered itself to really be the head of all the Greeks. And they considered to be like the most advanced state, definitely militarily, in all of Greece by, I'd say, about 500 BC. So, in 499 BC, Athens ends up getting a call from the Ionian Greek city-states in Asia Minor, which is modern-day Turkey. It's the west coast of modern-day Turkey. And all these Greek city-states are feeling Persian encroachment. Some of them had already even fallen to Persian rule, and all these cities like Miletos and Phocia and what's another one called? Ephesus, all these cities were facing Persian encroachment and Persian domination, and they needed help to beat back the mega monster Persian Empire that was trying to swallow the Greek world, starting with the Ionian cities. So Athens sends troops to aid them, and they start a whole revolt against the Persian Empire that is called the Ionian Revolt. So when this happens, I'm going to be getting into this. Now, it lasts from 499 to 493 BC, the Ionian Revolt. And it all starts with these Milesian tyrants named Histiaeus and Aristagoras, and ever since the Ionian cities were kind of conquered and by the Persian Empire and the Persians established their dominance over them in 540 BC, the Persians had been placing all these native appointed from the native population tyrants to rule these Ionian cities. And those two that I mentioned earlier, they were the ones ruling Miletus. So they were nominated by the Persian satrap who ruled the entire Ionian region from the city known as Sardis, which is actually another one of the Greek cities. And Aristagoras in 499 BC launched an expedition along with the Persian satrap Artaphernes to conquer the island of Naxos, and that was penetrating a bit too deep into like Athenian influence and a bit too close to the Greek mainland. And Athens didn't really like that. None of the Greeks really liked that. And they wanted to try to push back the tide of Persian control, essentially. So he launches this expedition to try to bolster his own position, of course, and the mission ended up being basically trash. and he started fearing his removal from the office of being a tyrant, and Aristogoras basically chooses to incite all of the Ionian cities to rebel against the great Persian king Darius the Great. So, Athens and Eretria in 498 BC support this after they send troops the year prior. And the Ionians march over to Sardis, capture it, and burn it to the ground. And they start returning to Ionia afterwards, and upon their return, they're followed by Persian troops, and at the Battle of Ephesus, they are decisively crushed by the Persian troops. So that would mark the only and last offensive action ever taken by the Ionians, supported by Athens and Eretria, and after that, it'd be permanently on the defensive. So, the Persians responded again in 497 BC with a three-pronged attack. They wanted to recapture the outlying areas of the rebellion, and the revolt was actually starting to spread pretty far, all the way up to this region called Caria. And the largest army under Darius had relocated to their earlier. So, while he was campaigning successfully in Caria, an army was annihilated in an ambush at the Battle of Pedasus by the Ionian Greeks, and this resulted in a stalemate for the remainder of the year, and actually going into 495 BC as well. So for the rest of 496 BC and going into 495. So by the time 494 BC rolls around, the Persian army and navy had regrouped successfully, and they just decided to march straight for the center of the whole rebellion, which again was at Miletus. And the Ionian fleet moves to defend this great Greek city by sea, and they were defeated at the Battle of Lade. After the Samians defected their forces and joined the Persian side, and that was a whole kind of shocking situation because the two fleets line up for battle, and just as they start engaging in battle, the Samians defect over to the Persian side, and the Persians just get the upper hand even more than they already had as far as numbers go, and the Ionian Greeks are just totally shocked and basically annihilated by this defection. So then Miletus gets besieged and captured, and the whole population is under Persian rule at that point. So that double defeat pretty much ended the revolt and destroyed any chance of the revolt being able to continue at least successfully. And the Carians also surrendered to the Persians at that point, and the Persians just spent 493 BC going across Ionia on the western coast of Asia Minor and just destroying every single city that was still trying to make the Ionian Revolt continue. So then they put a peace settlement on the whole region of Ionia, and it was generally considered at the time to be pretty fair. So the Ionian Revolt is basically the first major conflict between Greece and the Persian Empire, and as far as Athens goes, this would be a huge thing for Athens, because at this point, Athens had struck, or rather attempted to strike, a major blow at the Persian Empire. and Darius vowed to get revenge on Athens and Eretria for supporting the Ionian Greeks in this revolt. And that provokes him to later invade Greece. And in 490 BC, the Battle of Marathon happens. As we all know, Miltiades destroys the Persian forces on the beaches of Marathon. And that puts an end to Darius I's hopes of conducting an invasion to conquer Athens and Eretria on his own. And also the rest of Greece along with them, I can imagine. So, that whole thing that happens, that whole grudge that happened right at the beginning between the Persians and the Athenians, and I suppose the Eretrians, although the Eretrians really ended up being under the nominal rule of the Athenians, so we'll just say Athenians and Persians. So that whole grudge that happened between them, that was what really started the tidal wave that would end up coming with Xerxes at its head later on. And at this point, Athens was confident, but also a little bit scared about the next Persian invasion that would end up coming along, and their confidence would get the best of them as they would continue to live in peace and develop their economy and all those sort of things. And they would just really, really solidify their position as a rival city to the city of Sparta, which would end up becoming a big deal later on. But the first and foremost thing that had to be dealt with was the Persians. I mean, all Greeks felt this equally, except for the Spartans, but the Spartans would end up feeling the brunt of it later on, as we all know. So, the Athenians, after the first Persian invasion, after the Battle of Marathon, where Miltiades comes out and he just decides to attack before Spartans' support arrives. And he crushes the Persians completely with his incredible strategy. By the way, Miltiades was actually disrespected later on and imprisoned, and I believe he died in prison. I'll have to confirm that. But all of that amazing stuff that happened really, really put the Athenians on their high horse. As far as just being prestigious. That might not be the right expression, but they really, really had a huge boost in morale. And prestige went up a lot. And Sparta started taking this a little bit as a challenge to their previously declared hegemony over all of Hellas, Greece. So, in 480 BC, the Persians return under Xerxes. And Sparta takes the first step while Athens is totally going crazy about this whole invasion. And they don't know what to do, and they consult the oracle at Delphi, and the oracle at Delphi tells them about how a wooden wall will save them from the Persian invasion. A lot of Athenians start to take this wooden wall as being a literal wooden wall, and they recommend the construction of a wooden wall. Themistocles steps up and says that wooden wall is useless, and that's not what's going to save the city. What the oracle meant by this is a fleet of ships will save Athens. A lot of people oppose him. In his opinion, a lot of people disagree with him, but with his tactfulness and political charisma, he ends up gathering up the funding and support to build the Athenian fleet. And he really, and the thing is, this fleet that Themistocles wanted to build at this point, his aim was to really not just represent the city of Athens, but represent the whole of Greece united in their bid to destroy the Persians who threatened to take away their freedom. So this was a huge deal, and the fact that the Spartans were participating in their glorious defense of the pass of Thermopylae that every single person who knows a thing about Greek history knows about, or has at least heard of, and if you haven't, you really gotta get into this, because, wow. You gotta read about the 300 at Thermopylae, and it wasn't just 300, but I'll save that for another video as we focus back on Athens. So, Themistocles wants to represent a united Greece. He builds this huge Athenian fleet made out of these little trireme ships against the gigantic trireme transport ships of the Persian army that's required to transport all these Persian soldiers. And just because the Persians make everything big. I mean, their army was like roughly 400,000 men strong, and back then it looked like 1 million to the Greeks. And really, who could blame them? I mean, an endless army that rattles the earth as it walks. Of course, you're gonna put it down in your record that the Persians brought 1 million troops. I bet the Spartans definitely felt like it was 1 million. And the Athenians are now preparing for the Persian arrival after they get news that Leonidas has fallen at the hands of the Persians. After Ephialtes betrayed him and revealed the goat path to the Persians, and the Persians encircled Leonidas' position and wiped out him and his forces. So Athens starts preparing, and they start evacuating Athens because they know a land battle is not going to be enough to destroy this Persian invasion. I mean, the full force of the Persian army is already on land. It's not like they're landing on the sea and landing a few of their forces, I mean a fraction of their forces on the beach, and you can just destroy that fraction and make the rest get scared and go away. It's not like that, which was the case at the Battle of Marathon. It's not like that anymore. Now, the whole force of the Persian army is boots on the ground, and it's just, there's no chance that even if every single able-bodied person in Athens picked up a spear, it would just be a disaster for them. So they evacuate the city of Athens. City of Athens gets captured and sacked twice, actually, by the Persians, but as you see in the movie 300, Rise of an Empire, how Athens is getting sacked and all the women are getting raped and the statue of Athena is getting burned to the ground and the Parthenon is on fire and everything. No, that's wrong. The Parthenon, the statue of Athena, those things did not exist yet at the time. The Acropolis was basically just a temple at the top and perhaps a few other buildings, but not the Parthenon, just like a regular temple. And it did not look like that by that time. That was Pericles who did all that, and we'll get into him a little later. So, now, we'll actually maybe get into him in the next video, because I think this is going to have to spread apart into a few parts. So, Athens gets sacked twice, and captured within a year after Leonidas falls at Thermopylae. And the Athenians, led by Themistocles, of course, along with all their allies, have moved the army camp to a small island known as Salamis, that's just off the coast of Attica, where Athens is. And the Strait of Salamis, which is a strait of water between mainland Greece, Attica, and Salamis, is where the Battle of Salamis shall take place. And the Athenians under Themistocles, would come up with the most daring, incredibly successful naval strategy, one of the most incredibly successful daring naval strategies in the history of naval warfare. And that was the circle formation and the closing in and fast maneuvering of the smaller Athenian triremes to completely destroy, dismantle, and sink a giant fraction of the Persian fleet at Salamis, and the Persians just get routed. So they come into this strait. Big mistake. Xerxes should have seen this, but he was too busy enjoying good food and sitting on his throne thinking he was going to win no matter what. Wrong. He sails in with his entire Persian fleet into this narrow strait. Themistocles calls the attack, and the Athenian ships just come in from all sides, go right in between the big lumbering Persian ships, start ramming them, breaking them in half, smashing them to pieces, boarding the ships, taking them down in a melee combat. And it was just a total, complete victory for the Athenian navy. The Persians run with their tail between their legs. They just run to northern Greece. And they are totally surprised and totally thrown off by the fact that the Athenians, just a little Greek city-state in Greece, was actually able to pull this off. Actually able to defeat the great army of the massive Persian Empire in the East. And the Persians are shocked completely by this, but they're down, but they're not out. Not yet. So, after that, in 479 BC, the Athenians, along with the Spartans and all the other Greek city-states like Corinth, Olympia, I think Elis maybe, and a couple others, all participated in the Battle of Plataea. And Thebes famously contributed troops to the Persian side at this battle, I believe, after they contributed a contingent to help Leonidas at Thermopylae. They do this. I mean, it just takes a real snake to make a move like that. But anyway, Athens, Sparta, and all the allies defeat the Persian army, finally, once and for all, at the Battle of Plataea. And Athens, after this, takes the war to Asia Minor, and keeps pushing the Persians and taking islands off the coast of Asia Minor, and all the while, little do the rest of the Greek city-states know that Athens is building up the soon-to-be Delian League that will be established, which will exact Athenian hegemony across the whole of the Aegean and almost the Greek world. At least a big fraction of the Greek world. So, Athens, at this point, has gained so much confidence after the Battle of Salamis, so much grandeur, so much glory, and so much power that they, and so much success with their newly built fleet, that they end up being the naval dominators of the Aegean, and building up the Delian League, which is where they go to all these Greek states on all of these islands, all across the Aegean, and they basically force them to pay tribute to Athens by either money, or if they didn't have enough of that, they can pay by building ships to contribute to the Athenian navy. So it was basically a whole collection of Greek city-states subservient to Athens. Now, Athens, at this point, has a plan. So, Athens is building up this Delian League, and they want, their goal is to build up the Athenian navy so much that they will be unrivaled, and they'll basically be able to sail around the Aegean doing whatever they want, and they could even get to the point where they expand. But that is their goal. And Pericles, the first major Athenian archon to step up, takes the reins on this idea. His idea is to have a very defensive approach to the now imminent, upcoming Peloponnesian War. And in the next video, I will be discussing everything that Pericles did, everything that he accomplished regarding the development of Athens from the interior, and also his whole battle plan and battle strategy for the Peloponnesian War and how to conduct it and how Athens should go about building its empire. And I'll be discussing the theory of why Athens didn't end up being like Rome, and why they didn't end up securing full dominance across all of Greece, and actually end up expanding their reign outside of Greece, just as Alexander did. I'll be discussing all of these points in my next video. And I will also be discussing the war that took place with Corinth before the start of the Peloponnesian War, and how that kicked everything off, and how that basically made all the other Greek city-states start realizing that Athens meant business, and their whole stunt with the Battle of Salamis wasn't the end of the flexing of their muscles, I would say. So, all of these things will be discussed in the next video, and right now, I really want to say that Athens is at the start of an incredible journey at this point. They are moving forward. They are making it all happen. They're building up their Ionian League, getting all of the cities in Greece together, and the Ionian League is really an alliance more than anything else, and that's going to play a key role in how Athens considers itself as a power. Because, you see, when we look at ancient Rome actually directly 100% conquered every single territory that they occupied. They 100% ruled over all of their territories. Athens didn't really do that. You see, all these states in the Ionian League, they were essentially independent, but they were just subservient to Athens. And this all comes from the Greek mindset of independence, and how independent Greek city-states should be valued. Their independence and their freedom should be valued over anything else. And you see, in ancient Italy with Rome, they didn't have that. They were just like, whoever could conquer more and be bigger was better. And there was no idea of independence being such a high-valued thing. I mean, it was high-valued. Of course, people's independence is high-valued for everybody, but it wasn't like an engraved cultural idea. Italian culture tended to focus more on warfare and domination than freedom. And that is the significant difference between the ancient Italian culture and the ancient Greek culture, and why Athens at this point wasn't wasn't on the road to being like Rome as much as they thought they were. And that would contribute something to how the whole Peloponnesian War would play out. So Athens is taking this opportunity in this push against Persia to really solidify their position across the Aegean and develop themselves militarily before they go on to develop themselves culturally and economically and socially, as far as the city of Athens itself goes and the Attican Peninsula. So Athens is trying to show Sparta that Sparta isn't the only superpower in Greece, and they're doing a pretty good job of it with this whole new navy that was created by Themistocles. And I will end this video with what happened to Themistocles after the Battle of Salamis. So Themistocles, of course, was extremely popular. Now, the way Athenian democracy works out is that they never want to let anyone become too powerful. It's just a natural reflex that it has, because if somebody becomes too powerful, it kills the purpose of the democracy. So Themistocles ended up being ostracized, and which means he was basically banished from Athens. And he left, and his friend inside the city gathered up his family and allowed his family to leave Athens to join Themistocles himself. And his wife and child, I believe, joined him in exile. And Themistocles ended up, funny enough, going to the Persian-ruled part of the now Persian-ruled western coast of Asia Minor, and becoming the satrap of the region over there, becoming a satrap in the region over there, and governing over one of these cities. I believe it was Ephesus. And he ended up serving the very people that he was so much against in the Battle of Salamis. And actually, the Persian, the leader of Persia at the time, Artaxerxes, really did respect him. The Persian king Artaxerxes I really respected him as a warrior and a general and a leader, and that was really why he awarded him the governorship of Magnesia, not Ephesus, Magnesia. And Themistocles just ended up living there for the rest of his life in peace with his family, ruling over his now Persian subjects. But in reality, they weren't very Persian. There was actually like a majority of Greeks in the region, because this is the Ionian Greek lands. So, of course, the majority of the population will be Greek, and that was perhaps another reason why Artaxerxes selected Themistocles to govern Magnesia, because he knew he'd govern it well, and he knew the population would never revolt against Themistocles, the hero of Athens and the Greco-Persian Wars. But still, it is a bit ironic that he ended up being a governor in the Persian Empire. And he eventually dies in 459 BC, as far as we know, of natural causes. And after that, Athens regretted what they did, just like they regret all the disrespect they give to many of their heroes. And they established him as a hero of Athens and the entire Greek cause as a whole. And Athens idolized him in the eons to come, all the way up until now. Not eons, but thousands of years. So, Here we are, the Athenian Empire in its infancy. Themistocles now being idolized as a hero after being exiled and after dying in exile of natural causes. And the Delian League is born. And in my next video, I'll be discussing the scrap between Athens and Corinth, followed by the Peloponnesian War and the rule and reign of Pericles and everything beautiful that came along with the reign of Pericles, as far as buildings, economy, Athenian democracy, and Athenian power across the Aegean and the Greek world. So, I look forward to having my next video, and have a great time, you Philhellenes. I'll see you soon, and I promise it won't take me as long this time to rule out the next one. The Ancient Greek is out.